look at the colorful life of an Appalachian entrepreneur or mountain legend, better known as Brandy Jack. So, as we go on, this is it. This is the generational connection to Brandy Jack. And if you can look here, this is Brandy Jack, born in 1824. This is my great-grandfather, David A.J. Mullins, born in 1857. He died in 1905 at the age of 45 years old. This was my grandfather, James Russell Mullins. This is my dad, who, matter of fact, is still alive today. He'll turn 90 years old November the 2nd. He's been through 2 heart attacks, a stroke, loss of my mother back about, 8 years ago or more. And he's still going strong. He still works on engines and loves to just tinker, and he's a YouTube fanatic. This is me. I don't know who this is. Yes, I did. I'm sorry. This is my son, Andrew Russell, who is named after Andrew Jackson, and of course James Russell. And Andrew is my son. He'll be 28 day after Christmas, and he's going to be married in October. And he has a strong interest in family history and genealogy. Basically, when I talk about Brandy Jack, I go back on 3 different people up here: Sherwood or Sherwood Mullins, Brandy Jack's father, born in Montgomery County, Virginia. And if you were here yesterday, you probably saw Jim Glanville's presentation of where they talked about the train, of how it came through the mountains, came down through into Christiansburg, and then from that point out, it funneled out and it went in about 3 different directions. Went at the Cumberland Gap, some went through Pound Gap, of course some went through the Breaks, but they all funneled out in different directions. Then there's Booker Mullins, which was Brandy Jack's grandfather, and down below here, this is a new addition that I've put on here through looking at Family Tree. Back in November of last year, my dad had a genealogy test. For the first time in his life, he suggested to me, and I had talked to him after talking with Oakley here at the presentation last year at Tales of the Cumberlands, about getting a DNA test to find out who my great-grandfather was. My great-grandfather, we didn't know for a long time. We didn't know who he was, where he was from. We just know that he was a mystery. But after Oakley had talked to me and then I presented it to my dad said, let's try it out and see. As long as I don't have to go and do like a little sample cup like they do in the lab and go in a cup, I'll be fine. I said, it's a test tube, Dad. I said, you just have to go and spit in it. When we got the results back in about 3.5, almost 4 weeks, we were floored because we found out mysteries, they were solved, and then it opened up the door on other mysteries. But you see the name up here, William Mullins Atkins, as I put off in parentheses. There is no definite, proof right now. There is some genetic proof, so to speak, but the Mullinses may not have been the Mullinses after all. They may have originally started as the Atkinses. What happened was, we think, somewhere down the line, William, or at least my family tree as I have it right now, one of them didn't have any parents, and then took up with a Mullins family, and then adopted the surname of Mullins, and from that point on, they became Mullinses, on down the line as we have it. Here is the scallywag himself, and when I say scallywag, I want you to hold on to your seat because this is going to get interesting, okay? This is Andrew Jackson, Brandy Jack Mullins. Brandy Jack was born in 1824, Floyd, Pike County. He died in Dickinson County. He was married 4 times. Not as much as Elizabeth Taylor, but close enough. The facts were, married Pollyanna Mullins, 1850 to 1864. That is the line where I come out of. And also, I'm pleased to say that Ginger Center is here today, and she comes out of the married Pollyanna line as well. So we are direct descendants from that first set. Now, this is where it gets kind of complicated because wives 2, 3, and 4, the family was more diverse, spread out, and my first set, or direct connection up there with Mary Pollyanna and Brandy Jack, really didn't know too much about what was going on with the rest of the family because he had so many different wives. Now the other thing is too, he had 21 children, or at least that's what's officially recorded, okay? When I say officially recorded, we don't know. Sort of like the stories, like I said, that I got in trouble with Nancy Wright Bays. Devil John had mistresses and maybe ladies on the mountaintop. Brandy Jack had mistresses as well. I'm also going to say Phoebe probably had a couple of misters, let's say. Brandy Jack was known more than anything else for counterfeiting silver coins. And I put that in quotation marks up there because guess what? They're not really all silver. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. He later made whiskey from apples on an apple orchard. And yes, how many people know what woods colting is? I told this definition last year. Jack Wright was the only one that was able to identify it. Woods colting is just another name for someone who engaged in the practice of having his women. And that was known and passed down through the family that he was known for the term of woods colting. Now, other stories that we haven't confirmed yet. Brandy Jack may have killed several individuals, but an exact number is unknown. We don't know. We don't know the story about it. His son, Noah, which I have born to Phoebe, was rumored to have practiced in what I talked with someone who's kin to me. In some ways, you could call it torture, or at least he did things as a form of punishment, and I would say he probably did it to his enemies and adversaries that had run against him and crossed him the wrong way. That's what had happened. There used to be, or at least the story of, a killing tree or a lynching tree that was somewhere located up on Caney Ridge in Dickinson County, Virginia. I don't know the exact location. I don't know if I want to know where the exact location is. But it's still, when I hear the thing of torture, lynching, whatever the case may be, that's when it started to scare me a little bit more about who this man was. It's also rumored, but not proven, that Brandy Jack may have poisoned, could have, I'm saying could have, we'll never know, at least two of his wives, one or two, to conceal his dalliances and move on to marry another woman. Case in point, Phoebe Vance. When Brandy Jack got out of jail, I think he got out of jail around 1882. Phoebe died probably within a year or two after that. Okay? She died supposedly of TB. That's what at least it says in the Brandy Jack book, Brandy Jack and Beyond book, I think, is TB. His third wife, which was, from what I understand, a very young girl, at one point it's been told that he started dating her, or at least seeing her, at the age of 13 years old. And before Phoebe was, as some people might say, as the story goes, before Phoebe was even cold in the grave, he was already on his way to the altar, and he had a bun in the oven too. Let's just put it that way, okay? If you don't know what bun in the oven is, I'm sorry. I just had to throw that in, okay? All right. One question I'm always asked is, did Brandy Jack have connections to the Killing Rock Massacre of 1892? Any direct connection? No. But he did have an indirect connection. And for the first time, I've been able to find a really good picture of my great-grandmother, and that would have been none other than Rhodesia Bentley, and her father was John Vent Bentley. John Vent was one of the first on the scene at the Killing Rock near Town Gap in 1892. He was a constable down in Elkhorn Creek, what is known as Jenkins now, and he heard the gunshots. He was out working, whatever it was that he was doing that day. He heard the gunshots up on the mountain. He got on his horse, he went up there, and he surveyed the aftermath. And when he got up there, he describes the aftermath. And this is one thing that Sarah Beth Hopton had asked me about before. What was it he supposedly saw? He saw men, women with their innards outside of their body because of the shotgun blasts or the guns. He saw women with their breasts wide open, mainly because of the shooting. But this was an ambush, folks. If you've never been to the Killing Rock, you need to go. The Killing Rock was a perfect place for you to be able to go and ambush somebody, and then they would never know what hit them. Well, the Ira Mullins family, they found out about all this the hard way when they crossed the mountain, and then the attack happened from Doc Taylor. And this is what I'm also going to add in here. John Vent looked around and he found shells that day. And he identified shells, and he said, I only know two people that have guns that can shoot shells like this. One's a Potter man, the other is Bad Henry Adams. Bad Henry Adams was implicated, or at least alleged to be implicated in the massacre, but like co-conspirators Cal and Heenan Fleming, if you've heard of them before, they never made it to trial. Okay? Bad Henry Adams, though, did do some time in prison after that, but that's another story. Now, this is the connection. I've got a little bit of explanation right here. This is what my dad refers to as Grandpa Dave. He did not ever meet him because, as I said, he died when he was 45 years old. My dad had not been born yet. But by the time that this massacre and everything had taken place at Killing Rock, Ma Rhodey, as we call her, was 20 years old. Grandpa Dave was 35. They were living in Dickinson County. My grandfather had not been born yet, James Russell. But this is the family, the children, Rosabelle, Eliza Jane, Alvin, John Harrison Mullins. Okay? Now, why is this important? Because this was Appalachia. And I've just got to say it plain and simple. This is Appalachia because it was tightly knit like a handmade rug from those times, and if that rug started to unravel, what did you do? You cut the loose ends. That's what you do now if you've got a rug. You cut the loose ends to keep it from rattling any further and coming apart. Appalachia was no different in many ways as what we would consider the mafia. And I refer to it as a mountain crime syndicate. They were in like thieves. Hate to use that word thieves, but that's what a lot of them were. And in-laws were family until someone crossed the line or double-crossed another. Then you've heard of the term in-laws and outlaws. That's where a lot of the in-laws ended up becoming outlaws. Brandy Jack wasn't the first Mullins convicted and sent to prison for counterfeiting either. He came from a long line of counterfeiters or entrepreneurs, and all of them were very good at what they did, including the fact of getting caught, it seemed. The great counterfeiters of Southwest Virginia included Saul Mullins. He goes by certain traveling names, we'll say. Solomon, Solomon, counterfeiting Saul, money-making Saul. But you also have to understand, too, that there were tons of Solomon Mullinses and other Sauls around at that time, just like there were Andrew Jackson Mullinses. Of course, Andrew Jackson Mullins, Brandy Jack was second. Third was Creed Short. Creed was one of the grandchildren of Brandy Jack, and he picked up right where Brandy Jack left off. So where did Brandy Jack get his silver to make his coins? You remember that I mentioned some things about it. I mentioned that supposedly he had silver. Well, there's been tales. There's been tales told for a long time that he got his silver from Swift Silver Mine, that a little old lady in a black shroud traveled across the mountain from Clay County, Kentucky to come over and bring the gold. I find that highly doubtful. And last but not least, he used Baker's silver. Well, truth is, he did use some Baker's silver, but this was the thing that I found out that was fascinating from last year to this year. He was a true flat-out scalawag. I'm just going to say it plain and simple, folks. Anything that could be melted down was allegedly stolen from people's houses. I was told that he would lay in wait. He would watch people as they got ready to move the entire family and move them out to go to town, because going to town was a big thing back in those days. Everybody loaded up. You didn't leave the kids at home to watch Netflix. You went and you loaded up the entire family. You went to town. And you were gone for quite a while. Brandy Jack lay in wait. He'd go into the houses. He'd just ransack, get what he could, come back. This is the other thing. He would befriend people, invite them over, either to get to know them, eat, start sliding silverware away, start hiding it, start taking it out of there. And yes, I'm saying silverware, but at least it was metal, something he could find to be able to go to where he could melt it down. Then he would melt it down, mix it with the Baker's silver, or whatever else he could scrunch up. Now, I had always been told that he was sent to prison because of the silver that he had in his money. He had more silver in his money than the federal government allowed. That's not really true. He didn't have a whole lot of silver. If you can look at the coins up here, look how finely detailed they are. That's where the difference was, I think, more than anything else. I've had a chance to see some of this money before at a display, and I think it was back in 2003 when they had a family reunion up on Caney Ridge for Brandy Jack, and I saw some of the actual coins, what they had. Now, the story goes that all of the molds are gone. But there was one set of molds, or at least a set of molds, that had traveled through somewhere in the family or somewhere along the lines, but no one really knows where they are. I would love to see them because they say that they're in great detail, being able to show you. If you look at that, I can't tell a difference. I really couldn't tell a difference. If I was looking at something, it would have to be a save, and you'd have to have a save to be able to find out how much silver's in it. So the big question was, over time, was Brandy Jack convicted of counterfeiting or defrauding the federal government? Ginger, I'm going to ask you a question. Which one do you think it was?
I think it's counterfeiting.
Counterfeiting? There's some stories that are told that it was counterfeiting. I think there's some paperwork. Let me ask you that. What's the paperwork?
There's a document, and I think it states clearly it's counterfeiting.
Counterfeiting.
It's from the prison, we located the document, and it clearly says counterfeiting.
Okay. So there is a document that says counterfeiting. I've heard people say it's been defrauding the government,
I'll get you one.
but I kind of stick with counterfeiting.
That story was just family honor. They wanted to say there was more silver in those coins than in the federal government, and so he was not really as dishonest, but he was.
You and I knew that. I mean, that's just it. We knew that. Brandy Jack was arrested at Alley's Creek, which is Crane's Nest, which is close to the Dickinson County, Wise County line. Allegedly, Josiah Hill, who was a baker from North Carolina, sold out Brandy Jack and then told the U.S. Marshals as to what Brandy Jack was doing. U.S. Marshal Lars Seltzer was apprehended Brandy Jack and then later tried him in the Western District of Virginia, which was in Abingdon at the time, for counterfeiting, convicted and sentenced into prison in Albany, New York. Now, that's what I have in my paperwork. Now, Ginger, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. Have you ever seen the prison before?
I think I've seen that photo.
Okay. This is the first time I ever saw this prison. When I was growing up, I was told he was sent to federal penitentiary in Albany, New York. There was no such thing as a federal penitentiary at that time. The United States didn't have anything. This was really a state-run prison was what it was. But they started getting Civil War people coming in like crazy. They wanted the worst of the worst. I hate to say it's almost like in a way of our comparison now to Red Onion, Wallens Ridge, and places like that. They sent the worst of the worst to this prison. Brandy Jack was one of those quote-unquote worst of the worst. Brandy Jack spent 7 grueling, torturous years of his life behind bars at the walls of this supposed model facility. While he was at Albany, he learned of the death of the arresting officer, U.S. Marshal Lars Seltzer, who, matter of fact, was killed at another killing rock over near Flatwoods, over near Coburn. And that was the name of the other killing rock that comes out of history. Yes, Ginger?
By the way, he was killed by Brandy Jack's son, Noah.
Okay, and that's clarified something for me too. Noah did that. Noah killed him. And they always said that somebody, that knew Brandy Jack had killed him or something. The warden, as a matter of fact, came to Brandy Jack in prison and said, well, guess what, Brandy Jack? Lars Seltzer's dead. What did Brandy Jack say? Well, I can tell you one man that's innocent out of the whole thing. That's me, because I know where I was. So you can't blame me out of it. The second thing was, he related stories of the cruelty of the guards. Folks, let's put it to you this way. My son works in the correction system right now. They live a life of luxury. I'm not going to deny that. They live better than some of our kids in some of our public schools. But back in these times, he was served food. According to Brandy Jack, he was served food, a maggot. It wasn't even fit for a maggot to eat. It was that bad. Andy, a cousin of Brandy Jack's, was killed in front of him. Sadly, Brandy Jack watched him die. The way that they did this was, I think from the story that I had read, they took him and they dumped his head into a water barrel. And they asked him to speak. Tell who it was. Tell who's in connection with all this stuff. The guards did this. They kept on dumping him until they finally held him down and they watched him die. And Brandy Jack was helpless about it. He couldn't do another thing. Yes?
I wonder about this Albany because I have heard Attica, New York.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had looked it up. I had looked for an Attica, and then in our family history book, Brandy Jack and Beyond, it mentioned specifically Albany. At one point I was told Raleigh. Then I talked to a U.S. Assistant District Attorney out of Addington. He said there had never been any kind of prison in Raleigh ever before. He said if there was any place that they had sent them, they'd probably sent them to Albany. And then, last year, I guess really when I was getting this presentation ready, this is when I found that picture. And it was a magazine article because this doesn't exist anymore. They've leveled it. It went from being a prison to then turning to a, it was almost like, in essence, an insane asylum after that, sanatorium. And then after that, they tried to do some things with it. They just leveled it. And I forget what's there now, but that was the first picture I'd ever found of it. But I thought maybe it was Attica too, but it's all.
I have a quick question on
Okay.
your cousin Andy. Was it just because it was his cousin, or did the man do anything?
He was probably involved. They were all, family-wise, they were probably involved in some degree or another. And Andy went in, so.
Same counterfeiting charge.
Yeah, same counterfeiting charge, so. And, you know, the guards knew certain things of how to get information out of people, and that's what they were going to try to do, and that's what they did. Now, as I said, Brandy Jack was incarcerated 7 years. The sentence said 6 with a $200 fine. Here's a funny story for you. There's some other things up here you can read, but Brandy Jack left Phoebe Ward with supposedly $15 of money when he went into prison. He told her, take care of the kids, do what you have to do, but just make sure you've got some money. When I get back, we'll see what happens. And by the time he got back in 1882 and he was released back out from the prison system, he went back home. Phoebe had $7 left. 7 years, $7 out of 15. Would that happen today? No. It would never happen like that today. We couldn't do that. At that point, he moved back to Caney Ridge, and this is where I talk about a little bit with Phoebe Vance. He was 58 years old and started making whiskey at that time. Here's another funny little story that supposedly has been passed down. There used to be a gentleman, Hampton Osborne, who was a preacher for many years, a story that was written, I think it was passed down by one of the twins through the newspaper, about Brandy Jack trying to find out one time something was getting into his mash, his apple mash, in order for him to make his whiskey. At that point, he decided he was going to set out one night and he was going to hide out and see what he could do about finding out who this might be. Well, he didn't figure out it was going to be a who, but it was a what. Because the snow started falling. And by the time that he got there to where the big vat was at the end of the orchard, he found that there were bear tracks. And he started to follow the bear tracks. And the bear tracks started out normal at first. Then they started going every which way. The bear was drunk. The bear had taken in too much mash. He found the bear over a sinkhole. He had a hatchet with him, and he chopped its head off. At least he told people, at least the bear died happy. So that's what he was thinking about. Yes, Jim.
It wasn't whiskey made, it was brandy. And
Brandy.
That's how he got to be Brandy Jack.
Right, brandy. So, and I put whiskey in there. I probably meant to put brandy. So,
Yeah, probably so.
so, of course, Phoebe died in 1884 is what I have up here. He remarried in September of 1887 to Sarah Mullins. Lost her 2 years later. That's the one that I should be referring to right there. That was the quick one of where one died, and then he was marching on his way, going to the altar, but that was a set-up situation too. I think he was made to honor an obligation that he was going to marry this young woman, and she was a young girl at the time. Of course, Brandy Jack's last wife was Mellie Cordelia Barnes. These are some of the other offspring that I have. Now, and I apologize, one of the pictures up here, this is supposed to be Eliza Jane, but you also have to understand there was Lith. They were twins. This was the only good picture I could find, and I actually had to borrow Eliza Jane, or had to borrow Lith's picture in order to put in for Eliza Jane because I couldn't find a really good picture. George Washington Mullins, if you really want to get some good reading, there are some folks back here at the Dickinson County Historical Society. They do a contributing article in the paper every so often. They told a story that my dad had never heard of before. And my dad knew that Uncle Wash, as he was called, was a preacher. But at the same time, Uncle Wash was Santa Claus. And he went around and he kind of took up money, sort of like in a Salvation Army way. And then Uncle Wash died of a heart attack, and the news almost broke the hearts of a lot of children in Dickinson County when the headline got out that Santa Claus was dead. So I think they quickly were able to rectify that problem, but Uncle Wash was quite a character. Then there's Jarvie. He's out of the last set, as they have it. And then there's Noah. And if you see that face, that's the one I'm talking about. Behind that smile hides, honestly, the look of a killer more than anything else. Because he was shrewd. He ran with some big-time characters. Supposedly, he had an affair or he ran with Belle Starr, the bandit queen. He also met up with Frank and Jesse James, supposedly while he was on the run and they were on the run. He was in a cave one night. Frank and Jesse had come from somewhere and running, and they had been on the lam from the law. They came into the cave. Noah supposedly heard them. And he said, "What are you fellas doing in here?" And they said, "Well, we're looking for a place to hide. We're looking for a place, wondering if we can come in here and stay a little while with you." Noah looked at him and supposedly told him, "You best be moving on, boys. I don't want company." And if that's true, Frank and Jesse were actually scared of that little old man with that smiling face. That kind of concerns me. And then he also said that he ran with Devil John, right? And he said that Devil John was someone that you did not want to mess with. This is Brady Jack in his later years. I think that's Jarvie on the far right over there on the first row. That's Melly, that's Brady Jack. And I believe Willard is in that picture too, I believe. Is Willard in there? Is he in the back?
Willard's in the back.
Okay, Willard, I thought Willard was in there in the back. I think Jarvie was on that front row.
And
So.
Scott.
Okay. There's Brady Jack in his later years. As my mom used to say, and then also my aunt, he's a scruffy looking ugly thing, wasn't he? Of course, this is the Mullen Cemetery up on Caney Ridge. You'll know the typo. If you ever go up on Caney Ridge, they show his date, birth date, as February 22nd, 1813, but according to what our records is, his record was 2/28/1824, and he was 93 years old when he died. And he supposedly died of gangrene after supposedly stepping on a nail. I've seen the death certificate. And this is the Mullins family. This is the family that was sheltered, that only knew Brady Jack as that terrible person, that person that counterfeited money. This first picture right there, you can see at least a little bit. I'm always proud of this picture. My dad looks like somebody out of the Little Rascals. He's got his hat on backwards. He looks like Spanky. This is his surviving sister now, Norma. The other three brothers up there have all passed on. Haskell, and then there's Chester and Euless, who I shared a birthday with. This is my grandfather and grandmother. This is the one that I found out the information on through DNA in the last year. And I found that out. It's been tremendous what we have found. Then also this is Paul Russell's family up here. This is really what's left of the Mullins family. And of those, there's only two now that carry on the Mullins name of James Russell, Roscoe, and all that. And that's me and my son Andrew. So that's all that's left of keeping the Mullins family alive.
Your grandmother's maiden name was Short?
My grandmother's maiden name was Ratliff. She was a Ratliff out of Pike County, Kentucky. I will tell you a little bit about that. She was out of Pike County. She worked as, Randall Osborne and I were talking about it yesterday. She was a hired girl. She went to work pretty much as a servant for a family near Virgie, Kentucky. And when we did the DNA background, I had found a census that went back several years. And in that census I found, here it is. This shows where they're at. See, I decided to time myself today. So I'm about done. But we found in that census that 1900. She was about 15 or 16 years old, and there was a gentleman there in that household who was about 15 or 16 years old. We think nature took its course at that point. Because when I talked to the family about it and we started kind of making our connections, no one knew of a child that was ever born out of wedlock. So what we think happened, my grandmother was born 1901, April 1st. We think what really happened out of the whole thing, when she found out the census takers were in town June to July, somewhere in that neighborhood. Sometimes they went up holler, sometimes they didn't. They just copied stuff down based upon what a storekeeper would tell them or something like that. How many people live up in that holler? And sometimes they didn't get information out the right way. But we figure sometime about June or July is when the census took place. And then my wife and I were talking when we were putting this all together. Sometime around August, September, she found out she was pregnant. And she probably left at that point. Instead of carrying any other shame because somebody would ask the question, when did this happen? So we think that's what happened. So other than that, there's so many people I want to thank for this. Yes, let me get that.
I think you have a semi-famous, depending on what circles you run in, cousin, whose name was Rich Mullins.
The Christian singer?
The Christian singer.
Yes.
His father came out of your all's clan.
Okay. I've got to look that up. I have been told that before by several people that you may be of some connection to Rich Mullins because Rich Mullins had some connection with Letcher County, some Pike County, something in there, and I've really not dug into it.
I'm probably as familiar with Rich Mullins and him and who he was and what his story was than anybody. That's not not family.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother's family were Quakers from Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
and his dad apparently had went up there to work.
Right.
And,
I remember reading that.
Yeah, but I'd love to talk to you about that sometime.
Okay, that'd be great. Yes.
Didn't you said that the Flemings were never put on trial. Wasn't the one surviving Fleming brother put on trial, but Jane Mullins had already passed on?
Yeah. I think they were going to
There
put
wasn't
him.
anybody to witness,
Right.
to bring up as a witness, so they
Right.
said they threw it out of court.
So I think he was scheduled to go to trial, but
Okay.
he never did make it, so,
Which
yes.
of the DNA services did you use?
I use Ancestry.com. There was a lot of debate there as to what to use, 23andMe, and I decided to use Ancestry, so that's the simple one. Yes, back here in the back.
I was just wondering, you said there was no connection between the Fighting Rock or the
Killing Rock,
and the Mullins family.
Oh, Randy Jackson.
Well, just from Randy Jack.
That boy that was married to Ira's daughter
Mm-hmm.
was Marshall Mullins, and that Marshall was Randy Jackson.
Marshall and Bigfoot. And this is where I've kind of taken a little bit of liberty to kind of take that frame out for right now until I can confirm some things. I think I mentioned earlier, there are a ton of Andrew Jackson Mullinses, if you go back through the family trees.
Yes.
There are a ton of, oh my gosh, I mean, there's just different names. Solomon's another one out of that. I had traced down to last year that there was a possibility of a connection between Wilson, who would have been a nephew, Marshall Bigfoot Mullins. I want to get that confirmed. I put that out there because I had information there at the time that presented itself that showed me that, but I want to get it more concrete.
I've got books that will probably do that.
Okay,
And,
I would appreciate that.
but yeah, I'm glad you, but how I found it out was they were talking about it, and then Marshall, of course, is my great-great-grandmother. And, it's big.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had been I live near Virginia,
Okay.
so I kept on and on, they have a little bit of information at Pan Library,
Okay.
and the Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
They have them there, wildlife, they had, because all films was both in.
Right. Now Sherd and them, they came off, they were there at Bow
Yeah.
Camp. And they're buried up in the cemetery that's near Red Onion right now, out there on Mead Creek. So that's some of those right there. But yeah, I would love to sit down and talk with you about some of this and kind of compare up some things, so.
We can't find Marshall, his grave is in Marsh.
You're right.
We can't see him there,
Mhm.
that's all we can do.
Well, you would think someone by the name of Bigfoot would have at least a pretty big headstone. I would think, I mean, but I don't know. They had, and there was, Kojak and I were talking last night a little bit about something with Sherb and some of the Mullins family about Indians racing them back across the mountain.
That's Ambrose.
Ambrose.
I was going to talk to you, I will
Okay,
talk to you
yeah.
about it.
And so
I've got
there's
a
a,
story that I got off the computer, and it was a Mullins website,
Mhm.
I'd say 5 years ago. But I've got all that information, just a bunch of stuff that I run off at the house, but I don't remember all the details. on
yeah,
it.
that's it. I don't know all the
But it was-
details with
It
it.
was on Bo Camp, where it's supposed to have happened,
Mhm.
and if I remember right, it was back in, Money Making Saws or some of them lines. It may be Randy Jack's line,
Okay.
or something else.
Well, let me explain, and I'll close out, because I want Oakley to come on next, because Oakley's got a good little story to tell about the carnage at Glenwood. When I did the DNA, I started finding out that I'm not only just connected to Randy Jack, but I also fall back into Revolutionary John Mullins. And then I also fall back into, thanks to Oakley, finding out, and then Oakley's wife sending me an email and saying, you know what, I think you're out of the red and the blue bowlings. And then I was like, oh gosh, this has just thrown everything out of whack. So now as the tree stands, I have one strand of Mullins is running one way. I have another coming out of, I think, on Mary Pollyanna that goes back another way. And then also through my mother back on the Vanovers. The Vanovers go back into Revolutionary John Mullins at that point. And you have to understand, I did this presentation because more than anything else, I wanted to find out something about my family. My family wanted to go, and they wanted to hide a bunch of things for a long, long time. My dad told me when I was in 7th grade, I want you to shut up about this family tree stuff. There's things you don't need to know. And as we got older and I asked Dad, I said, who was my, great-grandfather out of this? He really didn't know. There had always been a rumor. And then 2 months before my uncle passed away, on the birthday that we shared on September 26th, I'm sorry, I get choked up a little bit on this. He told me, and that was the greatest thing he could have told me before he passed away. He said, I've got a name for you. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you because the people already know it, we've been talking. But his name was Newsom, and he was out of Virgin, Kentucky. Now, if you can find something about that, then you've answered one of the mysteries of the universe. That's what he told me. And sure enough, after the DNA test and it came back, the lady I was talking to, I didn't mention anything else. I said, can I see your family tree? She said, here's the link. Went to it. The hit had already started. And there was Roscoe Mullins showing up. And I have to give credit to Oakley, because Oakley kind of explained it to me in such a way. He said, get that DNA test before your dad or your sister or his sister passes away. Because the longer you go through the line, it's going to start being diluted just a little bit more, and you'll never find out who it was. Yes?
Was this Newsom, the 15-year-old boy that was in Virgie with the hired
Yes.
girl?
Yes. I will tell you the family. It was Samuel Newsom. He was a Civil War, Confederate Civil War hero. His back he'd been injured, back was broken. They had a family, had a very large farm, had several kids. The wife pretty much ran things, and from there, it was anybody that could help, they went in. I can remember stories being told to me that my grandmother told stories of when she was shipped back home after she was born, that her own grandparents worked her, as the old saying is, like a dog. And they treated her in a very, I think, sometimes insensitive way. And then I started finding out that that's kind of where I wanted to shut things down. I didn't want to find out anything else about that. But when I talked to Randall yesterday, Randall told me, he said that there were Newsoms at Virgie in Pike County that owned a lot of land. back during the Civil War, back during that time. And,
I think they
then
shipped
just in the
cotton
last,
out of Pike County.
I'm sorry,
I
Pike County.
believe before the Civil War, they shipped cotton out of Pike County.
Okay, that may have been it. I didn't know what they produced or anything like that. I know he had a store. But I had never seen a picture of him until probably back, I guess, this summer. And the lady that I've been talking to that has been so open about sharing about our family, about this connection, sent me pictures of him. And then we started seeing some pictures of some of his sisters. And one of his sisters looks almost identical to my aunt, the older sister of Norma that I showed you up there. They could pass for twins. That's how close they look. So there is a connection.
Did you say you were related to Shorts?
Yeah,
Because my great-grandmother was Short.
back through the Shorts, we're connected there. There was a connection there on the Shorts, and I've got the family tree I could pull up, and I could show you that maybe a little bit later. And I'm sorry I've taken up so much time of Oakley's time or anything like that, but I appreciate the opportunity to present this to you this evening. Thank you.